Hey guys, so this video will probably be a lot longer like some of my other ones are. I've made a few short ones in the past, but I wanted to talk about those of us who don't feel seen and heard. I've been just thinking back to relationships that I've had. And like I stated before, I think a lot of my videos are going to be about relationships within ourselves and how they affect relationships with other people. And I know there's probably a lot of people out there who've had that feeling. You feel like you're alone. You feel like you're invisible, like you're not seen and not heard. And if you are seen and heard, somehow you're the villain. Somehow you're the bad guy. So your true authentic self never gets seen and heard. And it hurts. It hurts like to the core. And I saw this in the homeless population that I helped. But that's where I resonated a lot with a lot of the things that people said. The people that I served, saying, I had this kind of childhood. And I would say, yeah, me too. I had this kind of relationship. And I would say, yeah, me too. They'd say, I feel like people only see me in my worst moments. And I'd say, yeah, me too. Some people, that's what they're looking for. Sorry, guys, I've got one cat here. The other one, okay, come on. But for me, I've spent the past couple years really working on myself. And I started, jotting down things about myself. I started journaling again the way I used to. I started doing it at the end of my relationship. And the other person didn't like what I had to say. Because it was just, I'd rather me not tell him how I feel. Especially if it had anything to do with him. But a lot of us, okay, lay down. They take turns. A lot of us, we feel like nobody really sees us, like nobody really hears us. And that probably comes from earlier in life where we were made to think that way. That whole children should not be seen or heard. Or, children should be seen and not heard. That was a lot of my childhood. And then that was relationships afterwards. And the sad thing is, and here's where I'm always like both sides, and I've taken accountability for my parts and things, is saying like we attract people like that. We attract people into our life. And then we end up treating them the way that we'd want to be treated. I had always made it a point to try to make people feel seen and heard. Like friendships that I had, relationships that I had. And sometimes in doing that, I wasn't seeing or hearing my children and how that affected them. Because my focus would go to, whatever relationship I had around me. And I would think, that it's no big deal to them. But they were going through that feeling of not feeling seen or heard. And I know for me, okay, you guys, sorry, I gotta separate them. It's like there's one of me and two of them. Sometimes they get along, sometimes they don't. But for me, I had had relationships where I would do everything that I could to make that person feel seen and heard. I would tell them the things, about them that were wonderful about them, that maybe they didn't see, that maybe they didn't hear from other people. I would listen for, what are the things that they want? What are the things that they like? And then I would try to get those things. I would make everything so personal to where anytime I gave a gift anytime I said some specific thing, it was for that specific person, to let them know, I see you, I hear you. But in doing that, a lot of times, I erased myself. I because they felt that way, they they weren't returning it. They put the pressure on me a lot of times of, you see me and you hear me, and then I can't do that back for you. And it created this hole that I'm sure a lot of us out there have felt, like just this black hole of where you think, like, are you seeing me here? And I'd had relationships where I had said, when they would say something about, this is who you are, in the middle of an argument or something, and I would say, no, I'm not that person. I'm the person who did this for you. I'm the person who got you this thing. I'm the person who's been showing you over and over how wonderful you are. How your strengths that you have. Who's done the things that other people haven't done. And then somehow that'd be turned against me. And it took me really this last relationship of the person doing it to me over and over again, to where I got to the end and said, you can't erase me. I'm not erasing me anymore. I see me, even if you don't. But I think a lot of us struggle with that feeling, and sometimes think, I would get to the point in arguments, and I've made videos about this before, where I'd be like, okay, I'm trying to talk to you about me. And then somehow the way that I talked was wrong. So then I'd try to write it, and then somehow the way that I wrote it, it was wrong. I'd try to play songs saying this is how I felt, and then somehow that was wrong. It was all, well, if you have anything to say about yourself that makes me feel bad, then I don't want to see you. And they would run away. Just avoid me. And then wait till I got back up on my feet and I saw me and I heard me and I started taking care of me, and then would come back in and then slowly erase me again. And I spent so much time wondering, like, why has this happened to me so many times? Why is it that I attract these people who I help out in every way that I can? I fix up their house. I get them all of the physical things that they need. I help them out with, things that I don't even help myself out with. And then in the end, I'm the horrible person, and it took me quite a while to realize, well, that's because you're not sticking up for yourself. You're not seeing yourself. They're not seeing you. They're just there to use whatever you've done to fill in whatever gaps or holes they have in their life. I would become the giver and they would become the taker. And in the end, I'd just be like, so I'm left with, now I don't see myself again. Now I don't hear myself again. Because I had done the sacrifice of myself over and over and over again for somebody else. That they had conditioned me into, well, I don't like that thing that you say, so don't say it. I don't like you complaining, so don't complain. I don't like you arguing, so don't argue. I don't like you standing up for yourself, so just give in. Just sacrifice. And it really took, I guess at the age of 50, and multiple people being like this, that I just said, enough is enough. I see me, even if you don't. And it took also helping out the population that I helped out with. that this self-awareness came about of, okay, the advice you're giving these people is the advice, do you hear yourself? Because I would tell people, stop sacrificing yourself for everybody else. Stop making yourself feel small. You know what I mean? Who cares what that person thinks? You're not a monster. You're not lazy. You're not the things that they say. I would tell people that had relationships, you know, it kind of seems like, you know, remember last time you told me that this person just showed up for the fun time and then they left? Well, why do you keep accepting it back? Why do you keep, you know, why do you keep believing empty promises? Well, I had somebody doing the same thing to me. Somebody saying, yeah, sure, I'll help you. I'll be there for you. And then when the phone's over and normal life comes into play and problems come up, and would leave again. You know, and then it was almost like I became that person to myself saying, what are you doing? You know, you just keep giving, you just keep sacrificing, you just keep erasing yourself to make this person feel better. And then you don't feel seen and heard, and you get louder, and then they shame you and blame you for that. Because then they see you, and then you're the problem. You know, and it sent me back to childhood feelings of, so you like all the stuff that I'm doing as long as I keep my mouth shut. But if I open up my mouth and say, this is who I am and this is who I'm not, you don't like it. You know, well, I'm not a doll. I'm not, you know, a puppet. I'm going to be seen and I'm going to be heard. And, you know, I had talked about creating a channel like this because I said, you know, I can't be the only one. I spent nights, weeks, playing songs on my phone that NF has a really good song with, I think her name is Sasha Sloan, that talks about I can't be the only one. And I would listen to that song and cry and think, like, am I the only person going through this? Surely I'm not. You know, I knew clients that did, but I thought, you know, what is going on? What is the problem here? But not realizing, like, a big part of the problem was I was erasing myself constantly in order to try to keep somebody happy who didn't want to be happy, who didn't know how to be happy, who I was trying to help somebody out with their emotions that doesn't even know what their emotions are. It became to where work and home seemed the same, where I just thought, I've got to fix everything. I've got to make everybody feel seen and heard in the good and do everything I can to help everybody else, while inside I just felt like I was vanishing. And I would say a lot of times, like, I feel invisible, you know, and so that was part of creating this channel, was just knowing, like, there's got to be other people out there. I know there's people out there, you know, at 11 o'clock at night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, that are searching YouTube for, am I the only person going through this? And you can read all of the self-help stuff that you want, and you can listen to psychologists or therapists talk about things. But I think the connectedness is with people who are experiencing the same thing. You know, our country so much now is like people not seeing the positives in others and just pointing out the negatives and holding on to those things, while others around them are doing everything they can to uplift that person. But I realized throughout self-reflecting in relationships and stuff is you can't make somebody feel seen and heard who doesn't know who they are, who doesn't see themselves, who can't hear themselves, who doesn't know, isn't aware of what they're doing. You can try all you want, but it will drive you to the point of like erasing yourself. It'll drive you to the point of where you think like that you're not seen and heard either. You know, that you have to make yourself invisible too. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. So for all of you out there that are feeling that same thing, you know, if you know if you know somebody who's been through some of the same stuff as you, you know, it's okay to open up and let people in. Not everybody's going to be the person who you feel like is erasing you. If you're not, you know, pull out a pen. I started writing down things that I wanted to do. I made a list, you know, things I wanted to do in 2025. Write some songs, learn to play the guitar, start a YouTube channel, maybe a podcast, you know, find a different job. And some of the things that those things I did, and some of those things I haven't done yet. But then I thought, okay, well, let me just change that to and 2026 or, you know, and to the future. I started writing down what I wanted to do, the things that I enjoyed, what I deserved, what I wanted in partnerships, what I wanted in a workplace, you know, and then evaluating like, is that what's going on in my reality? Because with my job, I felt very invisible. I felt very not seen and not heard until I was like having breakdowns about like, I can't do everything by myself and I need some help. And then people would label me right then. You know, that's who you are. And I would say, now you see me in my worst moment. That's not who I am. This is me at the end of my breaking point. You know, I started pushing back on the relationship I had where I said that this is not a relationship. You can't talk to me for 1 or 2 days and then ignore me for a week. I don't deserve that. I deserve somebody who's going to see me, you know, the way that I am, not just at my worst moments. I started saying, like, I'm not in charge of trying to regulate everybody else's feelings, trying to help people see themselves if they don't see themselves. I just started standing firm in myself and saying, I know I'm not the only one, but I'm the one for me. I'm the one who's going to do it for me, even if nobody else does. And then said, then that job will come where I feel seen and heard. That job, you know, will make me feel valued. I started saying, you know, relationships that I have in the future, they will make me feel valued because I value myself, because I'm not erasing myself. And, you know, if people don't like it, then they're not my people. You know, I always thought like, oh, I've got to save every relationship. I've got to mold myself into what somebody else wants me to be in order to be seen, but that wasn't making me feel seen. That was making me feel like I couldn't be myself. I had to put on a show and inside feeling like I was just, you know, being rendered invisible. So for those of you out there feeling not seen and not heard by other people, you know, try to see yourself, not the way other people see you, the way you want to be seen. Write down those positive things about yourself. You know, search for empowering songs. empowering mantras or sayings. Because, there's an old Saturday Night Live thing. I can't remember the guy's name, but he used to look in the mirror and go, gosh darn it, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and people like you. I had like note cards around my mirror that said positive affirmations about myself. That said, other people's stuff is not my responsibility. I started telling myself day after day, you're good enough. Even if other people or people that you want to see you don't see it, you're not invisible. You're, worth more than that. You're worthy of being seen and heard. And it was undoing all of the past thoughts that I had, or that people had placed in my head by the way that they had treated me, or that I had by the way that I treated myself. So I hope this helps anybody who's out there going through some of the same. You're not alone.